Refresh Franchising, the heroic choice for entrepreneurs. Proud sponsor of the Distilled Wisdom podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Distilled Wisdom. I'm your host, Adam Ferracane. This is Adam's Corner, my chat with you one-on-one. So I just got back from traveling around, and one of the things I realized is that I haven't told my story. So this episode's going to be a little bit different. I'm just going to talk to you, and I'm going to tell my story. Apparently, it interested a bunch of people while I've been on my travels. I've been going around to different conventions. I was in D.C. recently, lobbying for franchise protections, the NLRB's forthcoming rule on joint employer, but that's not what this episode's about. And I just got back from Philly, where I was at a franchise convention. It's called the Franchise Springboard, and this is for emerging franchise brands. While I was there, everybody kept inquiring about Refresh, my story, the journey, how we came up with the concept, and I realized that I've never told my audience about me. I find it a little weird talking about myself, and I've never actually gone through my journey and my story, so I created this podcast to interview successful people, and I guess I'm in, some circles considered a success now. Refresh is on the Inc. 5000 list as one of America's fastest growing businesses. And I think it's important now that we're franchising that I'm fully transparent and I share my story with the world. So I'll try to summarize and keep this, as simple as possible. And make sure that, we're not drawn out. I'm not writing a book here. But my name's Adam Ferracane, if you don't know me. And I grew up outside Chicago in the suburbs. And I had a pretty normal childhood. When my folks got divorced, I went through, a little bit of a stronger adolescence period than most people do. And, I've never mentioned this publicly, but I'm actually a recovered drug addict. And this is one of the drivers and one of the things that's pushed me to be a better person in my life was that experience of I got addicted to heroin, and I did a lot of other drugs throughout my youth. And I lost a lot of good friends along the way. I never graduated high school. I dropped out freshman year. So I didn't even go to a regular public school. Believe it or not, I had authority issues, hence why I now own my own business so that I have a little more control over the day-to-day. But, so I wasn't the model student. I wasn't the model kid, and I was still able to build what I've built today. But my childhood was, a little rocky. I've gone through things that I know a lot of people out there have, but the majority of people don't experience in their lifetimes. And I feel that it made me a tougher person in my life. Growing up outside Chicago in the suburb areas there, I grew up in Kane County, a town called Geneva. I got in a little more trouble because it was suburbs, so the police paid attention to smaller crimes, in other words. So, again, I wasn't a role model. I don't have an adult criminal record, but I wasn't the best child. Let's say my adolescence were kind of rough. I've had periods where I've slept underneath bridges. I've lived on the street. I left home when I was 17 or 18 years old, so I actually moved out of the house shortly after my folks got divorced, and I'm still close with both my parents. But I moved out, and, I've moved around the country. I've lived in different parts of the country, and for work and to survive, I worked for a long period in the restaurant industry and then on and off in the trades. And then I really took the trades serious after that, and I spent a lot of time in the trades. I had a period, where me and a group of friends all decided to move. Well, this is a fun story. So, sad beginning, but fun story. My best friend died of an overdose. And when he passed away, we were all kind of going through a rough time. And the days following his funeral, mind you, we're underage, but we're out at the bar, and we're contemplating leaving town, right? We're going to go explore the world. Mind you, we're 17, 18 years old at this time. So we're going to go leave the world, and we planned the whole thing out that evening. And we pulled out a map, and we decided where we're going to go, and we landed on Florida. We landed on Cocoa Beach, Florida. I don't remember the specifics on why we chose Cocoa Beach, but that's where we ended up. That's kind of where we pointed on the map, and that's where we were going to go. What's interesting is I was the voice of reason that evening, and I'm telling my friends, like, hey, the problems are still going to follow us. It's not a solution. It's not going to solve anything, blah, 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 blah. And, we all kind of brushed it off that night. And we left the bar, and I don't recall what triggered it, but I got into a confrontation with somebody, and I ended up getting in a fight at a carnival, and luckily, the guy didn't press charges, but the cops did show up, and they didn't arrest me for that. But he didn't press charges, so I didn't get arrested for assault or anything like that. But I did get arrested for public intoxication or drinking as a minor, one of the two. And so I went to jail that evening. And when I got out of jail the next morning, this is back before cell phones or anything, so I walked to the nearest White Hen, which is Illinois' version of 7-Eleven. I don't know if they exist anymore. But I walked up there, and I used a payphone to call all of my friends, and I was like, we're leaving. We're leaving today. We're going to Cocoa Beach, and we're moving. So we did. We literally sold anything we could. Like, I remember I sold a punching bag, and, we came up with like $450, something like that. And we decided we're going to move to Florida with $400 between three of us or four of us. And we packed into 2 cars, and we moved to Florida. True story, I actually lost my car on the way down there. I got impounded by Georgia State Patrol because the muffler was falling off. I'm telling the story to give, reference to how I had nothing, and I didn't really have much of a future at the time. And I moved down to Florida, and sure enough, our problems followed us. We still continued to use drugs down there. Got into a lot of trouble. We convinced an extended stay motel to let us all share a room. So there were 3 of us. We had all 3 of us piled into one tiny, tiny hotel room. And we ended up, getting by, but I got a job the same day we got to town. I waited tables for an IHOP. My buddy got a job a couple weeks later, roofing. And ultimately, things just continued to go south in Florida. So I stayed there for a little over a year, getting into trouble. And I could tell stories for days about my time there and prior to leaving. But I'm going to step back a little bit. When I was younger, before I got into drugs, my mom gave me a book. Anybody watching this, if you're interested in business or success, I'm sure you've heard or read this book. But she gave me Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that's, roughly when it came out. And I read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that was my first experience with thinking outside of the norm, as Robert Kiyosaki would say, the rat race, right? And I experimented prior to getting into drugs with my own landscaping business as a kid and a bunch of other things. And none of them really panned out, but I did better than, the average person that was working at McDonald's or something in my age group. And I earned more money doing that than they did. But I picked that back up after deciding to get sober. And I moved from Florida to Georgia. My dad had relocated there. And I worked and lived in Georgia for a while. I did a carpet cleaning there for a while. I did some fine dining there. And me and my father decided to start an online furniture business, which I had for probably about 2 years. And we did okay with it. It paid our bills. That was back in the eBay days. We were selling furniture on eBay, and we ran across some problems with logistics and the shipping. And orders would get damaged, and we kind of get screwed over because of packaging requirements by the shippers. But again, that's a whole nother long story. That was my next attempt at business, after, the stuff I tried as a kid, like mowing lawns. And we did okay with that. Both me and my dad were able to, pay our bills. We were roommates at the time. That might sound strange, but we were actually roommates. Both of us were responsible for our half of the rent, our half of the utilities and everything. And so I'm pretty close with my father. We've held a pretty strong relationship since that period. And
stay with us. We'll be right back.
Citizens of Distilled Wisdom, gather around and listen up. If you're a fan of the show and want to join forces with its host, Adam Ferracane, then Refresh Franchising is the perfect choice for you. So gather your courage, summon your inner superhero, and visit refreshfranchising.com to launch your heroic franchise journey. Refresh Franchising, the heroic choice for entrepreneurs, proud sponsor of the Distilled Wisdom podcast.
From there, I got completely sober for quite a while. I even quit alcohol, and I know a lot of you are wondering, how'd you get sober, so forth. I actually got sober by pure determination, which is unusual. Most people require, AA or NA or some kind of rehab program, which I think they definitely have their place. I didn't utilize any of those. I made a decision in my mind, and I quit using willpower. And, I went through the withdrawals. I did all that good stuff. And I got my act together. And I was a little bit lost. And I stayed in Georgia for a while, even after my dad had gotten divorced from his second or third wife. Sorry, Pops. I think he's had a total of 5. But he relocated to Ohio, and I was in Georgia. So I stayed there for a couple more years, and I enjoyed my period in Atlanta, and I had a lot of fun out there, and I really enjoyed my time. And we're coming to where I started getting more serious about business again. Me and my dad shut the furniture business down, and I took regular employment, moving into management. Again, it's a combination of trades and the restaurant industry. But I gained a lot of management experience, and I kind of moved up the ladder in both of those industries in different ways. I've held a lot of different jobs throughout my time. Again, it kind of goes back to that authority issue. I don't do very well with people telling me how to do something, what to do, so on and so forth. But I planned a trip. My friend, one of my very good friends, had relocated to Colorado. And I went out to visit him in Colorado, and I absolutely fell in love with that state. I went back and I quit my job. I packed my car and I moved to Denver, Colorado, where I took a job with him in the roofing industry, which, by the way, I'm a horrible roofer. I hate heights. So if you can imagine me on a roof just kind of shaking, that was pretty much my contribution to the roofing industry. So roofing wasn't my forte, and I had done carpet cleaning both in the Chicagoland area and in Georgia. So as I was applying for jobs, I ended up interviewing for a new carpet cleaning, a position with a carpet cleaning company. And this is actually where I met what I consider my mentor. And he mentored me in business, but a lot of people out there, they talk about, like, how do you find a mentor? How do you locate these people? How do you get somebody to mentor you? Well, my experience with it is, I mean, he never had title mentor. He was my boss, and he became my mentor over time because it was mutually beneficial for us, right? I started working there, and he had just bought the company. It was a pre-existing carpet cleaning company that had been around for years, I believe since like the very early 80s. And we're talking early that 2000-ish, somewhere around there. And I started working with him as a technician, and he had big plans for the company. He quit his corporate America job to buy this business and to scale it out. And I ended up learning so much from this man. And I climbed the ranks with him, and eventually I ended up getting to the point where I wrote a lot of the SOP for the company. I set up satellite locations for the company. I was vice president of sales for a while. And him, me, and another gentleman there were the three primary pushers of the company, pushing everything forward. And we helped scale this small $2 million a year carpet cleaning business in Denver, Colorado to, I believe we were in 6 states when I left the company, and, you know, doing tens of millions of dollars annually in revenue. We did that through a number of acquisitions and adding on other services. So this might sound familiar if you're familiar with my company. I learned a lot there, and I helped develop that company from the ground level. He got to a point where he exited and he sold to private equity. And I probably could have, took the comfortable corporate position, nice salary, retirement, stock options, the works. And that's just not in my personality. So I was in San Diego at the time when he decided to exit and sell. And I decided that corporate America wasn't the path for me, and I didn't want to do that. So I had a non-compete that covered most of the West Coast. I couldn't stay on the West Coast and launch my own business. So after building that business and him having a very successful exit, which, by the way, that company today is part of the largest amenities provider for multifamily in the entire country. That company, I believe, sold for just over $1 billion maybe 2-3 years ago, and it's changed hands a couple times since. And if I had to guess, the way private equity money works, they'll probably have another exit in that range in the very near future. So it's a wildly successful company. But instead of doing the corporate route, for myself, I've known since my mom gave me that book back in the day that, since she gave me Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so shout out to Robert Kiyosaki out there. You changed my entire mindset when it came to money, assets, and, I really admire that and appreciate that. So if you ever do see this, thank you. And I've continued my education since, by the way. So I probably, I read a few dozen books minimum a year. Early on in my, launching my business, I probably read 2 books a month. So you're talking, 24 books a year. But I relocated out to Ohio, which, if you recall, my dad had moved out there, and I was trying to figure out where I could go where my non-compete was, not enforceable, and I could rebuild and try to solve for some of the problems we had in the corporate model, which I either A, didn't have the ability to do because I wasn't the owner, or B, it just wasn't the right time for that. And I decided to come out by my father. Ohio's a relatively business-friendly state. And I moved out here, and he supported me in the beginning by, he owned a duplex. And I made an agreement with him where I would remodel the duplex because, like I said, trades, I'm very handy. I can work in just about any trade. And I came back and remodeled the duplex. In exchange, I was able to live rent-free for an extended period. And I used a credit card to actually launch the business, which I generally wouldn't recommend for people that are inexperienced or don't have a solid plan. Hence why I sell franchises, to ensure, that I'll make sure they're properly capitalized and everything. So it was a huge risk on my part. I came out here, though, and I did some consulting work while I remodeled the duplex, and I consulted for about a year with a local company out here that serviced the multifamily space, the same space I came from, which expanded my network and my connections within the multifamily industry. And, I got to know some people in the space before I went out on my own. And they were in carpet cleaning, it's one of my strongest areas. I know all the areas that Refresh offers, obviously, because I scaled them nationally. So I'm very well versed in everything. But they were in carpet cleaning. I identified I couldn't afford to launch all of the services at one time for Refresh, which, those of you that don't know, we have 4 brands: carpet cleaning, janitorial, painting, and bath refinishing. I analyzed the market, and I identified that refinishing was the weakest in the area. It was the most fragmented service in the Northeast Ohio market, and there was a desperate need for a good refinishing company. So I, with a credit card and a pickup truck, opened a refinishing business. I spent about 3 months behind the scenes building out the foundation for the company, and quit my job, and I launched the Refresh Refinishing, the first of the 4 brands. Things took off pretty quickly. Because I didn't have capital, it didn't grow as fast as I would like. There's some nuances in the multifamily space with managing your cash flow, which we will teach our franchisees on how to do. But without operating capital, you have to wait for accounts receivable to flow in order to fund your growth, because banks generally won't touch you for about a 3-year period. So the first 3 years were pretty rough in the company, and I could sit here and talk all day about growing the business, but the first 3 years was the hardest. But we are now, that company was launched in 2016. And so Refresh Refinishing has been around since 2016. And once we gained some traction, established a relationship with some banks, and set ourselves up, the company's rapidly grown since. We've been on the regional list for the Inc. magazine for the past 2 years running, and I expect us to be on the next one as well, obviously. And we were on the national list for the first time this year, so we're actually one of the fastest growing companies in the entire country now. And we started scaling in the other services as the company developed and matured. And we added in, the next add-on was paint. And then just over the last year or two, we've added on Refresh Janitorial and Refresh Carpet Cleaning. Now that my non-compete's expired with the company I consulted with, I couldn't even do carpet cleaning because I was under contract with that company. And that's pretty much my story. So I went through life very unconventionally, and I fought things, and I did everything the hard way, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And I decided I was going to learn the hard way. And the reason I do what I do is I want to help other people in situations like I was in. Most people in that situation, or early stages in those situations, are not going to be able to afford a franchise with Refresh yet. But my plan for the company is to have second chance programs and to take people that have made mistakes in life and transition them into business ownership eventually. We don't know what that looks like yet, but in the future, that's going to be the main mission of Refresh, is to allow people to come in and be an employee either at a franchise location or for a corporate location, and have a clear pathway into business ownership and to build themselves up. So I don't do what I do, ironically, to make money. Obviously, money is important in business and it's a resource, but I'm not that individual that's in this for the money. I want some fancy things. Don't get me wrong. I joke about this with our team. One of my goals is a private jet, and I will have that private jet one day. But aside from that, I'm pretty simple and I have pretty simple needs. And so I've been able to reinvest into my business and get it to the level it is today. And again, we are one of the more successful companies in the entire country, and we're only getting bigger. The conventions we were at, I had private equity money talking to us, and we're getting to larger levels. By the way, the company is going to stay privately owned and held, and we're not going to take any private equity money for the near future. So if you don't know what Refresh is, by the way, I'm a new franchisor. So I got to add my little plug in here, right? I'm looking for people to help me grow the brand. And I'm looking for people to open up our next locations around the country. We're currently targeting Pennsylvania, so Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. We're looking in Columbus, Cincinnati. We're about to register in Indiana, Illinois, and Michigan. So Detroit, Indianapolis, Chicago. And we're going to start pushing territories out in those markets first. The reason we're doing that is because we need to be close to those locations so that we can adequately support a new franchise owner. If anybody's watching this and you're looking for an opportunity and you have access to some capital and you feel that this is a mission that you would enjoy and that we're going to have programs to give back. We're going to work on that second chance plan for a lot of people out there. It's one of my favorite things. We have a number of recovered addicts that work for me in the corporate market. And I try to mentor my team as best I can, and I try to be there for them. I offer time on my schedule to help people that work for the local market to come to me with questions on how to repair their credit report, or, just general advice that I may be able to support them with. And I think it's important that we give back. And I can't think of a better mission for myself than making other people financially stable and wealthy and helping them build a future for themselves. And that's why I do what I do. The franchise model is dual purpose. It solves a problem that I had with my mentor under the corporate model. It's a very simple problem, and franchising solves for it really well, and it's the relationship at the unit level. Under the corporate model, when we open up satellite locations, one of the main problems is the relationship would fall apart after that manager opened up the location. So we would launch the market. You'd have a manager out there, a lot of times myself, opening up the market, building relationships at the unit level, meaning with the end user, the property managers, and opening up that location. And then once I would move to a different market or we would place new management in, the relationship would dwindle and the market would start to decline. Franchising solves for this because I get dedicated owners in those locations that build those relationships, but they're not leaving right away. And so they're going to do so much better with growing that business and they're vested in it. So it solves for that hiccup right there in the local market. There's so many benefits to our franchise model. It's very unique. There was a lot of excitement for it at this local convention I went to. I'm talking to franchise experts and people that lead in this industry, some very large companies, and they're really intrigued by our model. I have a feeling this thing is just going to absolutely crush most franchise models out there in the home service space. And it's because the different brands are able to play off each other. But I'm not going to go into a full sales pitch. If you want to learn more, you should definitely reach out and check us out. But that's kind of my story. I think it's important that I tell my story and that everybody knows who I am and where I'm coming from and why I do what I do. Because, if you do decide to become a franchisee and join our network, it's like getting married. We're going to be attached to one another. Another reason I'm telling this is my staff constantly tells me that I can be kind of abrasive sometimes in conversations, and people get the wrong read on me. So I'm definitely a very serious business person, and I can be kind of abrupt sometimes. But the reality is this is all coming from my heart. And everything I do is to support the franchisees, the people working in the network, and everybody in the entire Refresh brands. So that's my story. You heard from me. People were intrigued by my story and how I essentially came from nothing, A politician will tell you all the time, I struggled back in the day. Half those people don't know what struggle is. I lived on the goddamn streets. And I was able to do this. Anybody can do it. But I could have did it so much faster with the right support, the right people, and the right processes. And that's what we built here. I want to help other people go to the next level. Anyway, this has been Adam's Corner, my chat with you, one-on-one.
I'm Refreshman, and I'm here to empower you to take charge of your destiny. Are you tired of working for someone else? Do you dream of making a difference in your community and unleashing your full potential? Then look no further than Refresh Franchising. With us by your side, you can start your own heroic business venture with the unwavering support and cutting-edge resources you need to conquer your goals. Our franchise model is like a super serum that will give you the strength to succeed. Refresh provides extensive training, ongoing mentorship, and an established brand with a loyal customer base. Plus, you'll become part of a heroic league of entrepreneurs who serve as allies on your journey towards greatness. And the best part, you won't have to waste time building your business from scratch like some kind of neophyte. With Refresh Franchising, you'll hit the ground running at lightning speed and unlock the key to heroic financial success. So gather your courage, summon your inner superhero, and visit refreshfranchising.com to launch your heroic franchise journey. Always remember, together, we can achieve greatness.